Welcome everybody to another episode of Dad at Arms. I am your host, Dad at Arms. I also go by Colt. And with me today, I have a really cool guest. We're talking with Bryan Q. Miller, who was the head writer for He-Man and the Masters of the Universe on Netflix. Welcome, Bryan. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for having me. And I guess this is the part where I say also that I was the head writer on He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Uh, um, and have done comics for DC and a bunch of live action TV too. And this was kind of my first legit foray into animated TV. And it was a blast, and I'm happy to talk about it. So thanks for having me.
Very cool, very cool. Well, I'm glad you're here. Um, Before we jump into He-Man, what are some of the other projects that you have worked on? You mentioned DC Comics and television.
Yeah. I did Batgirl for a while for DC, about 10
Okay.
years ago. I have another, I can't say what it is yet, but I have another limited run project coming out with them hopefully later this year. It keeps getting pushed a little bit, but hopefully July-ish that starts. And let's see, I have executive producered on Motherland Fort Salem. I've written on and produced on Shadowhunters, Sleepy Hollow, Smallville, Arrow, Flash. And I'm sure I'm forgetting something in there because it's been a show called Defiance that was on Sci-Fi for a little while, a show called Dominion that was on Sci-Fi for an even shorter while, and wrote the animated straight-to-video Justice League versus Teen Titans for Warner Brothers. So I've done that too. Yeah.
Very cool. So, I mean, you are well entrenched in comics and the language of comics and
Multicolored things, yes.
yep, very cool.
Yeah.
So I think that translates pretty well to Masters of the Universe. I mean, it's very, it follows those very fantastical and comic booky, type of ideas and themes, and so I think you're a good fit. Uh, Before we jump into the show specifically with those questions, do you have what's your history with Masters of the Universe?
I mean, it's history, right? It's I was, oh my God. I think when I was 6, it was a He-Man birthday. And I remember it was a big deal because there was like a He-Man cake mold that we got from somewhere.
Okay.
Um, and that was kind of right around when what I had on VHS. There was like was it RCA or Columbia House? I remember there were red and black boxes of the box set. It was a collection, and I want to say it was all of season 1, maybe. And it got, I mean, there was a lot of episodes, but I had those and I watched them ad nauseum. And I want to say before the show even started, the first figure I got, which I had no context for because the show didn't exist yet, was either like Beastman or Merman. I'm not sure
Okay.
which one, but those two were my first two. I had them before I even had a He-Man,
Wow.
because those I guess happened to be at the store. I mean, I have no memory of acquiring it, but I remember like having it first, and just kind of rode with it. Gosh, I want to say up until New Adventures,
Okay.
and then I don't know. Like at the time, I have no memory of whether I didn't respond to New Adventures or if it was just on at a weird time. Because I mean, again, for the children, whenever something was on, it was just on, and you
Yeah.
either got to watch it or you didn't.
Yep.
And so like I want to say somehow maybe it wound up coming on like super early on like Sunday mornings or something. And so I didn't really get to see New Adventures at all. But kind of it was a pleasure to when the job opportunity came up, to kind of revisit a lot of stuff I hadn't touched in a while. Like I just hadn't, I like and had like bits and pieces of memory. Like I talked about this on Twitter at one point. We did one Evelyn and Tila heavy episode in season 2. And so Amanda, who wrote that one, and I were talking about it, and we both had very vivid recollections that were incorrect of the original episode, which was God, what was it? The Witch and the Warrior or something?
Yep.
I'm trying to
Yep.
remember the title, but and so I was, so for me, I was like, yeah, we got to do one just like that, right? Where they're around a campfire and like she really lets her guard down, and Evelyn like takes her helmet off, and she had white hair. Oh my God, she has white hair. And she was like, yeah, that's super cool. We both went back and rewatched it. And there's this whole other thing with like a sultan and like some other stuff where we're like, I had no that like that's not what my little lizard brain took away from that episode at all when I was little. But a lot of those episodes, it was really fun, kind of going back in and just seeing like imprint wise, just as far as like from a creative standpoint. Oh, that's what the kid remembers from that episode.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what sticks around for 30 years, right? It's like, oh, there's a big dragon thing in a helmet. Or oh, there's a box with a diamond and it makes a person disappear. Like it's bits and pieces of those that were really a treat to go back and see, just to kind of fill in the blanks in my own head of like, oh, that was the episode with the maze and the apple in the middle. Okay, that was like there was a lot of stuff like that.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I remember watching that episode with Tila and Evelyn in the CGI show, and
Yep.
immediately being like, okay, here's the campfire. I mean, this is obviously a
And
reference to Witch and the
yeah,
Warrior. So
yes,
it was
it
cool.
was
It was
totally
very
on
exciting.
purpose. Yeah.
Love it. Um, do you have any favorite characters?
I mean, I guess I don't know if it's popular to say Orko. Just because I mean, when I was little, like a lot of your memories are like little kid memories, and
Yeah.
he's the perennial screw up when you're little. And so for this show, for the CG show, when Rob and I were talking through it, when I came on board, he mentioned like maybe we'll do Orko, but Orko's like a robot, and he's a robot that like thinks he's a wizard. And I was like, yes, let's do exactly that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was kind of my suddenly my non-negotiable for the show. It was like, no, 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 we're still doing him as a robot that thinks he's a wizard. Um, so I guess Orko, I have the most Orcos. I guess you can't see him. I've got what is it? There's an Orko. I don't know if he's Origins or Classic because again, like the lines confuse me sometimes.
Right.
But
Right.
he's got like a purple cloud under him with like a clear stick, and there's
Okay. Yeah.
Orko up
Yeah. Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic figure. So I've got him, and then a few Christmases ago when I was working on this, my wife got me off of eBay like an original Orko with the little
Oh, cool.
wheels under him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, it didn't have the pull line, but then I've got Orko right here and like a Funko Orko. So I guess it'd have to be Orko. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. That was when the Revelation series came out. I've had He-Man stuff in at my house since as long as my kids have been alive,
Yeah.
and it's always been something that they kind of tease me about and roll their eyes about that I've got so much stuff about it. But when Revelation came out, my youngest watched with me and he fell in love with Orko in that series. And then watching the CG series, he again fell in love with Orko. So Orko quickly became his favorite character. And so
Yeah.
that was fun. And I loved what you guys did with him. The robot Orko who thinks he's a wizard is just fantastic. I mean,
I fell in love with like that at just that idea, like that concept. I was just like, oh,
yeah.
whimsy. We could do
Yes.
whimsy.
Yes.
But
Well,
also
it's
like
just so
in
charming.
well, and in the Kirby-esque kind of DNA of the He-Man stuff too. It's just
Hmm.
the notion of like with the magic and the science and the fusion of all of that, that like can and we got there eventually, but can a robot really do magic?
Right.
And so that was something we tried to hold on to from the very beginning.
Yeah. Very cool. Love it. Um, all right. So, this version of Masters it's different from the standard
Mhm.
iterations that we see over the years. It's very much kind of a reimagining for a new generation, is how I took it. When you guys began working on this new series, was that always what it was going to be from the beginning, or did it evolve over time from a more classical approach?
Um, by the time I came on, there had been there had been, excuse me, a writer who preceded me on it, but was not on it for very long, and it wound up just like every time they went through it, it was very good, but it had a very old He-Man feel to it. Like it was super super dedicated to and faithful to the lore and the old show, and felt a little bit, I think, probably at the end of the day too much like Revelation, just as kind of a an unofficial official continuation of the old
Right,
stuff.
right.
But B, kind of when I came in and I started talking with Rob about it too, I was like, I sat down with, oh God, how old was my kid at that point? He's almost 10 now, but when we did this, he was probably 7 into 8 because animation takes forever.
Hmm.
And so we sat down to when I was reacquainting myself with the old He-Man stuff. And as we were watching it, like there were certain things he cared about, and it was like a weird focus group thing where like as we're going through and like thinking about what I remembered from when I was little, you really didn't need to know a lot of extra stuff in some cases, but in other cases, like you really wanted to understand the characters a little bit more, especially for um, younger, slightly more, I don't want to say savvy because that's not fair to us when we watched TV when we were little, but like that I think there are certain check boxes that a modern young audience just expects from what they're watching, and part of that being, who is Adam? Why do we care about Adam? Like, who is
Right.
Tila? Why do we care about Tila? And so, kind of taking the time in those first 4 episodes to really get in and let them all meet each other and introduce their dynamic and let them work on it. And then also kind of pumping the brakes a little and slowing down because they were always going to all have powers. That was always part of the deal, was they were all going to have the split. But I think the original iteration that preceded me, it was maybe like by the end of episode 2, like it was really fast.
Okay.
And some of the stuff I believe that not in spirit, not in tactile, because there were giant snakes that we never did, but in the assault on Eternos that was in the first season finale, that was also all the way up in like episode 2. And so just kind of the point I made to Rob was like, what else are we supposed to do? Where are we? It got real big real fast. um and kind of what we didn't want to do, and that was I think fun for me, like in revisiting old He-Man and coming back to this, was I'll get you next time, He-Man, and then like the running away at the end of every episode.
Yeah, yeah,
Because that GI Joe Cobra Transformer Decepticon, like that dynamic of the heroes always being behind and the villains always being ineffective, like just didn't seem to be anything we wanted to do. So it
okay.
was fun to come in kind of like a comic book in a way and like slowly over those episodes introduce the different characters and the different concepts, and give everybody time to really appreciate when the kids do get their powers, like in episode 4, because they've had their
Yeah,
asses handed to them for like 2 episodes or 3 episodes,
yeah, yeah,
instead of them being super awesome right off the top. And then giving them the opportunity to fail with that stuff, because it's like learning to ride a bike, especially like for kids who are literally
hmm,
learning to ride bikes. It's great if you can get on and just ride right off the bat. But I think there's them being a little more imperfect, kind of in line with them being physically and mentally younger. Hopefully made them a little more relatable for the kids who were
sure.
watching, because it's like, oh, he says weird things at weird times. Duncan does, just like I do sometimes. Or, oh, Tila doesn't like all the responsibility that she has, but I don't like all those chores either. Stuff like that. So
Yeah, yeah.
um, that was fun for us in the crafting of it. I forget where we even started with your question, but I feel like I answered it somewhere in there. So
You did, you did.
yeah, okay.
No, I think that's great. So in those changes that occurred in this series, we see, how I've always looked at it is that this is a very different looking Masters of the Universe,
Mhm.
but it contains a lot of the heart
Yes.
that Masters is known for, that we love about it. I think when it gave me chills watching it, and kind of having that, okay, this is He-Man, this is where we're going, is when we see the flashback of Prince Adam when he is at Castle Grayskull with Keldor, and he steps in between Keldor and Eldris to protect
Hmm.
her,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know, and you see his heroics, come out, and
And
that's
even with the
something that
amnesia, that's still, yeah.
exactly, that's the part that is retained, you know. So very cool, very special. I still like watching that scene, just such a cool moment.
Well, and we had
But
a
with
big
the
debate like with young Adam versus like teen Adam too. Like speaking to the old show, like do we need the secret identity part? Like is
right,
was a big like do you need him hiding it from his friends? Like how much of the story do we need to really like burn away with that stuff, because that eats a lot of time, and it's the basis for lots of superhero stories, and I'm familiar with
sure,
superhero stories. So there's a natural inclination to do it, but really, as long as we wrote it for, like, it was really just about like putting it on the central character part of like, can I tell my dad who I am? And so like just making it that there is this public perception of what He-Man is for a little while, and then we kind of just don't deal with it in season two, but until the very end when they come home to Eternos. But letting that play out as more of an emotional thing, because what we kind of got down to with the old show was like, why can't Adam do it? Like, yes, he's a superhero, so that's why he has to have like a secret identity, I guess. But
yeah,
so we really kind of tried to step into that and put it on it's his dad's rules, and then making it more of a kid friendly thing of, can I tell my parents what I've been doing that I'm not supposed to be doing but I like doing,
yeah,
and letting that be more of a coming of age kind of thing for him. And then once it's out of the bag, then it's out of the bag, but it's not really a deal because they don't live in the city per se,
hmm,
until much much later in the show, and even then they're questing, so it's not that big a deal.
yeah, yeah, very cool. Um, so with these backstories of going into these characters, right out of the gate, you've got Tila who didn't grow up at the palace. She's not the daughter of Duncan. Um, she's already used to using magic.
Mhm.
Uh, I think you call her a hand witch, is what she's called
Which, yeah.
in this show. So she's not necessarily the warrior that we're used to. She's already adept with magic, and her ultimate destiny is learning who she is and where she came from. And it was a really cool twist on that because it brings in some of the lore from the very early mini comics.
Mhm.
You've got the idea that Tila was a clone of the sorceress.
Yeah.
And in your story, she's actually we find out that she's a reincarnation of
Mhm.
Eldris, which was really fun. And then you've got Duncan who worked with Cronus,
Mhm.
um, and is a kid, isn't an adult mentor type figure, which was really fun. You've got Adam coming from a tribe in the jungle, which is also pulled from the early mini comics.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, just lots of cool through lines and references to the established, you know, and changing history that Masters of the Universe kind of plays with. Uh, I don't know. I thought it was a really fun way to reinvent these characters. But I am curious, what was the what was your reasoning for making them kind of not so different, but different in the sense to where it is definitely different from what came before, like especially in terms of Tila and Duncan, being the same age in this series rather than father and daughter relationship.
Well, I think with there's a certain like Tetris to doing like an ensemble thing where you have multiple characters, and you don't want to have too many. What's the easiest way to put it? Not everybody can be Han Solo on the
Right,
team, because then Han Solo isn't special if everyone is
right.
Han Solo on the team, as a writer friend of mine told me once, and I was like, Jesus, that's profound. Okay, because I was describing something to him. It's like, yeah, we're all a little bit Han Solo. He's like, they can't all be Han Solo. I'm like, why not? And he explained. I'm like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. Um, that's why things don't work when that happens. But with this show, I think in the Tetris of it, um, I think for me, and I know for Rob too, when we were talking about this stuff and developing the character kind of grid out, that it all kind of in that way started with Cringer, and not having Cringer be a coward,
Okay.
because what we got into, and which was probably us overthinking it, but we're both dads, and just getting into like issues of consent and all of that stuff, where Cringer's always like, please
Yeah.
don't make me do it. And Adam's like, screw you. And then he's Battle Cat. But it was just like, God, it's just like, because as an adult going back and watching that stuff too, you're like, poor Cringer, poor freaking cat, like he's just let him be.
Yeah.
And I know you need to ride something, He-Man, but like just let him. So kind of starting from reconceptualizing Cringer as being more of the Davros from Game of Thrones, or
Yeah.
the Onion Knight, the Consulary, the wise mentor. And starting at that point with him being marginally pacifist, but he kind of likes to get messy, but he got his claws taken, so he's kind of like a wounded vet. But giving him all of those characteristics, then suddenly, okay, well, if we're locking into that, then how are we going to change everybody else? Because then if you have him as the mentor, then you certainly don't need, even if Duncan were the same age, he certainly could have been the pragmatic, level-headed voice of reason kid
Sure.
in the
Sure.
group, right? So you're still kind of leaning into old school Duncan with that. But we had that with Cringer. So we decided to just, we needed someone who could not shut up. And so it was Duncan. Um, and so like if we give him where like he's like leaning into the aspects of Man at Arms, like how many old episodes, where him like, I've made this laser beam that does blank. And like he's always just in his workshop making stuff. So clearly like he's a really smart dude. He's always building stuff. So what if we, put that into a kid who has the same level of smarts but has never had an outlet for that, and so he does talk too much. He fell in with the wrong crowd. He was marginally vocationally adopted by Cronus to be an assistant, and then like a hench person from the vocational orphanages, which was my one bit of bleak dystopian attorney or whatever, was like, yeah, there's orphanages where like Randor just lets kids go to work. Um, because there's got to be reasons that people aren't happy with him being a king.
Sure.
Um, so just kind of everything trickling down from that. It's like, okay, well, if we have more of our comic relief with this one, and if we're saying that Tila and we're leaning into her having, being an evolution or a reincarnation of sorceress, or Eldris in our case, she's going to have a little more of that den mother, like keeping everybody in line, like let's just get this done so we can
Yeah.
go home. And then the challenge then came in with Crass and Adam, because I remember that there was some desire from Netflix's part, like to make Adam a little more wisecracky and a little more hot-headed. And I was like, well, we have that with Crass, so we don't. You'll like him. He's the one who wants to do good no matter what. Like you guys will
Yeah.
end up liking him, but he's not like a jokey guy.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the last little piece of that puzzle, was parsing out, which pieces of what were going to be, Crass, which wound up being, like Ram Man, temper, and like, just let me at him, like, doing a
Hmm.
little bit of what's his face from Lord of the Gimli, the little
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, giving her some of that. And then kind of what's left for Adam is in this very Clark Kent Superman way, like this nice chewy kind of moral good center, balanced against, yeah, but I just kind of want to screw around though also, because I'm like 15, so like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
maybe we don't do this today, maybe we do that, but also letting him, and I mean all the kids, but specifically letting Adam not be burdened at first by the power of Grayskull, and letting him
Yeah.
like, this is really cool. I like being, basically Shazam. Like I like having this other thing that I can become that lets me do things that I wouldn't otherwise be able to do.
Hmm.
And letting that piece of the hero fantasy play out, and then eventually episode 4 spreading that through the other kids.
Yeah. And I think that's what's really fun about this version of Adam, um, as an adult, looking back at the idea of his secret identity and how he has to pretend to be a coward and irresponsible, while his father is constantly kind of berating him, and Tila's, always berating him
Yeah.
for it. It, you
Yeah.
know, it's funny, but I can't help but think, well, what's the emotional and mental strain on this person? You know, how do you do this, play this part with this burden on your shoulders, and you can't even tell the people you love who you are, and you have to pretend to be something that they're obviously disappointed in, and so that was something that I always kind of think about, probably again, like you said earlier, overthinking it, because it's a cartoon, and it's the secret identity thing.
But it's still a story, right?
Yeah,
So you're still,
yeah,
yeah, so it's not overthinking it necessarily. Like, and I know that, we were parallel development, right? So Revelation was happening at the same time
yeah, yeah,
as us, and Rob was kind of the one floating back and forth between the two. And so they're really through just the miracle of all of us monkeys at typewriters, there wasn't really that much overlap between the two shows from the conceptual side or the development side, even though we were playing with the same toys. Like every
Mm,
now and then there would be something where it's like, oh, the other show is going that way. And so just one of those things that was kind of a guardrail for us was they already knew they were going to the Tila being kind of scorned from Adam
yeah,
not having told her the truth thing.
yeah.
So since Secret Identity and the consequences of Secret Identity were going to be such a big part of that show,
Hmm.
then specifically the first half of that show, then for us it was like, what, well, if they're doing that, let's like that show is doing that, then
Yeah.
let's not even play with it, and Secret Identity and the cost of that is over there. And I think I'm trying to remember. I think the only thing, and it took us a while, Savage He-Man, um, in the Kevin Smith show, when he powers up without the sword,
Hmm.
and he's like, me He-Man. Like that was the only time that it really bumped into us, when we had He-Man possessed of havoc
Yeah.
in the third season. And we I think we had already recorded all of Yuri's dialogue for that one too. So really what it came to was, because he was much more and it was just, we're like, okay, so let's just say, Yuri's like, so how do you want me to sound? I'm like, well, so not like Hulk, even though like I know the physicality is all going to be Hulk and he's green, so like let's just say cocaine. Let's just say Adam got hooked on cocaine a lot. He's like, "Yeah, this is a party." I'm like, "There, that's it. That's
That's
what we're
it.
doing. Is Adam with cocaine." And so that was kind of how we at least pulled it back from being too similar. Was that one, and it was only for like 2 episodes. It wasn't going to be for
Sure,
much more
sure.
than that. But as far as the dual development goes, that was really like, and occasionally like a toy thing, but not very often. I don't think we had any toy stuff really come into play, I think, until season 3 too, which is when it's like, oh, they have a giant bat themed tank now. Okay. uh, and so it's like, yeah, we really need to make a bat tank. I'm like, okay, we'll make a bat tank. But there wasn't I think blessedly for us, there wasn't too much of that on the front end. Like there are certain things that, if I knew there were certain bits and pieces of the action figure stuff where, like, for instance, if we had given Rami a weapon instead of her just having her helmet, then that increase, it's all this interesting stuff you don't think about, but that increases playability with the figures, because then
Okay.
suddenly there are figures that come just in general in the toy industry. There are action figures when they come with stuff, then they are deemed to have higher playability than when they don't come with stuff.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's why, like, for some of the releases, suddenly, like, what Merman has like a squid thing
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that
They have
comes with him, right?
the little pets that come
Yes,
with them.
the little pets that come with him, because then that, and I get it, like that makes sense. That increases playability. So
Sure.
I'm not gonna argue that, because the toy people know what the toy people know. But I think in a few cases, in hindsight, like, I would go back and just add a few little different tweaks and bells and whistles to them to kind of make some things more appealing or appetizing for the merch side of things, just to see some variants of stuff, because I couldn't tell you between the ones I have on my shelf and the ones my kids have, like, the number of just little He-Man swords that are just around my house right
Oh
now,
yeah. Yeah.
like all silver, all yellow. That one that's got what, the bigger one there, that I'm pointing like you can see. Um, my the what is it, the Masterverse He-Man with all the joints.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He's over here on a green backdrop that I got from Big Bad Toy Store, maybe, or but it's like a grayskull colored explosion looking thing. But
Yeah,
he doesn't fit on the shelf anymore, so that's why he's not behind me. But giving them things to play with, helps, I guess, sell
sure.
and move the toys. So um, I guess, I don't know. I would change some of that, but
Okay.
yeah.
Awesome. When I guess when you're writing for something like Masters of the Universe, are there certain anchor points, or I guess things that are constants that you're required to stick to, and then other things that are more flexible and changeable.
Um, I don't know that there were too many. I mean, aside from certain things that were larger brand um issue not issues but larger brand kind of rules or mandates of like Tila is some evolution or derivation of sorceress,
Hmm.
and just like some little things like that, where it's like okay they at the time that was going to be a portion of or mentioned in the live action movie. Um, and that was going to be in Us. It was going to be. It's a big plot point in Revelation when she finally
Right.
comes around to that. So just kind of, I think any of the things like that that came up were just about streamlining things that could be across all the different interpretations. As like you said, like the signposts, like
Yeah.
the sword, being a conduit for the power of the castle of Grayskull. Adam being a prince, just little things like that. But there were other things certainly that were much more fungible and malleable, like Cringer or like Rami, who wasn't really showing up in other versions.
Right. Right.
And then things that we just didn't want in the kid space too. Like I personally and Rob was on board with this too, and we got animation on board with it eventually. But like we didn't want He-Man to ever pick up a gun. Like he's got that
Okay.
sword. Like we don't like
Yeah.
so like there were a few things that we like in our heart of hearts from the He-Man side were like, no, I don't care if they have guns. He's got his sword. Right. And as
Yeah.
soon as they have their weapons, they have their weapons, and that's what they use. But like what's interesting too is um the symbol. I'm looking at it right now on my Masterverse's chest, the split sword that's also the H, that's
Hmm.
also the M. Like a lot went into trying to get that figured out, because they were looking for something that they could then put across brand, like into the
Yeah.
feature, like the Autobot symbol. Like
Sure.
no matter what, if it's on the back of somebody's car, or like the Decepticon symbol, or like in any cartoon, oh, that's what that symbol means. It means
Hmm.
Transformers. So
Yeah.
that's, I think, part of the goal, and we'll see if it turns back up in other iterations. But a lot of thought was put into that H split sword HM look, which I think it's kind of cool that it's got like three or four different like things crammed into it.
Yeah.
But that's one of those things too that was hopefully going to be a tentpole for the brand, just as far as like, oh, if it's got that symbol, that means He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Kind of this is leaning into a personal question that I always like to ask, because one of
Mm,
my favorite things of Masters of the Universe, and and this is something that if you can speak to it, go ahead. If not, I totally understand. Um, one of my favorite things in the lore is He-Man and Teela's romantic relationship.
sure.
And I talked with Tim Seeley about this, because
Mm,
in his Masters of the Multiverse book
yeah,
that
yeah.
came out years ago, one
I
of
got
the
them from, well, there's a new
and
stuff
there
too.
yeah
That,
there's the new
yeah, yeah,
Masterverse
yeah,
ones.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So in the multiverse book, they're both kind of multiverse stories anyways, but
Yeah,
um in his first multiverse book, he reiterates the point a few times throughout, that He-Man have a soft spot for Teela's. And that was just something that always stuck with me. I mean, it was something I loved as a kid, seeing and hoping to see more of.
sure.
uh when my wife and I got married, she actually let me put He-Man and Teela action figures on our cake, on our
Nice.
wedding cake. And so, it's something that's always been one of my favorite parts of to see and to look forward to. Is that ever something that you guys were going to be concerned with? I know this show is kind of more geared toward kids,
Yeah, I
and so
mean
that was kind of my thought. But
it
I was
was
curious.
it was a conscious choice. It was a conversation, because there specifically, like in the first couple of episodes, like we had the meet cute with Adam and Tila,
Yeah, yeah.
outside of the village, and we kind of just had to like, in a 22-minute thing where you have this many characters, like how much can you actually do service to, like, well, and knowing like specifically from the focus group of like my kids, like what they care about and what they don't, um like it really, what resonated more for us was the push and pull of home and friendship and family between Crass and Adam,
Mm,
and the Tiger Tribe, instead of putting a lot into like, ooh, are they going to smooch? Like, what's going to happen over there between Adam and Tila? And because it definitely was like part of, I think, the original idea before I came on. And then just as we started like rolling up our sleeves and getting into it, there wasn't room for it.
mhm.
And B, we could have made room for it, but then like, is it worth it at the end of the day? Like it just wasn't like, because for a viewer of that age too, they don't necessarily care. Like it's
Right,
not
right.
right. So then
Yeah.
then we're just writing that stuff for us. And then when you like take a step back from that, then you're like, so I've got these two 15-year-olds. Are these two 15-year-olds gonna hook up in this show for children? Like it's yeah, it's no, it's okay. We
And
pass. We yeah.
and that was kind of what I thought it came down to, because there's definitely some moments in that first couple of episodes where
Mhm.
there's a little bit of that tension there, and I think
Yeah.
there's one part where Adam, or when he's He-Man, when he first becomes He-Man, he trips and falls on top of her, and they're looking
Yes.
into each other's eyes, so
Yeah.
you can see, I guess, the hinting being laid, the tracks being laid.
Yes.
But then I was curious about, well, it is geared for kids, so I really don't know if this will go anywhere, because
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, it
like you said,
was
that's what kids aren't into.
yeah, and it was much more like specifically in those first two, I want to say probably, that I think we paired it back as much as we could, just giving ourselves like an escape hatch just in case, like, someone like Netflix is like, oh, we need more romance. Like, okay, well then we at least have that there,
Sure,
and we
sure.
can call back to that at some point. So I think that's why as much was left in of kind of that feeling and that tension as was, but it certainly wasn't so much that that we had to yeah, I think Crass was a part of that too, that we were able to
Yeah,
use Crass to kind of shift it from, she's not, and Cringer calls her out on it. It's like, it's not that she's jealous that Adam's talking to a girl, it's that she doesn't want to lose her brother and her best friend
right,
to
right.
the world that Tila represents, which is the outside world and the bigger world and cosmic responsibility, and that becomes a big kind of bone of contention for all of them for a while. But yeah, no smoochies, and then especially like when the character design started coming in too, we're like, I don't want to watch these guys make out. Like, let's just not. There's no. They can hug, they can high five. Like, let's not. We don't need anybody to. We don't need anybody to kiss.
It makes perfect sense. But I had to ask. I had to ask.
No, no, all good, all good.
Um, so, and this is another thing that I want you to be comfortable talking about with future plans. We have seen, there's been, it was kind of an unfortunate tweet fiasco where somebody, it got out that the show had been canceled. And it's like, no, it wasn't canceled. It was not renewed, which are,
Right.
different things. Is that something you can speak to, or is it still too early to even
I
talk about
mean,
that?
it's as far as I know, like, again, unless no one's telling me, but I don't think that's the case. Nothing's going on. Like, it's just
Okay.
it was like when you look at, which is unfortunate, but when you look at the standard numbers for just how many episodes of blank Netflix currently does, especially in the kids space, like Troll Hunters got like 60 episodes or something, but also that's like 10 years ago when they agreed to that. Or like,
Hmm.
like the Fast and the Furious cartoon had those different iterations, which were also through an outside studio, it was through DreamWorks. But like 26 episodes is a really solid number for Netflix for one of
Yeah.
their animated things. So, we left our little just in case it blew the roof off, and they were like, yes, we need more. And then
Yeah.
RIP, Kevin Conroy was our
Mm.
backup plan for Hordak. And I mean, like, as far as just a tangent, like highlights of the whole experience, like because we had George Takei and Wallace Shaw and Bobcat Goldthwait. We had a bunch of really awesome voice guest stars, but like just in that final stretch, because it wasn't even, I think we were pretty much done by the time we got Kevin. And just like having that afternoon with him to just record those couple of lines, were just like, it was like, "That's fucking Batman, that's awesome." Like, it
Yeah.
was just,
Yeah.
it was really cool. And I'm sad to see him gone, and we don't get to do more with that, but just getting to hang out and be like, okay, so think about your Bruce Wayne voice. and then take your Bruce Wayne voice, make your Bruce Wayne voice a villain voice. Like just being able to kind of go in and modulate, and just imagine you're a 9 foot tall space Nosferatu. Um, and he was like, I can do that. But it was a good time. It was a really good time, and was sad to see him go. And that's a tangent, but
Yeah.
but speaking to future seasons and all that stuff, I know there's some concept already hints at it in the Dark Horse book.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's, while not exactly, I think, what we were going to hope to do in a future season, it, at least I think in spirit, is close enough to what we had been talking about for doing future season things. And then, if we could have gotten Shira, maybe we got Shira.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're going to be able to, because no one seems to know who owns her. So,
Right. Right.
but
Well, that was definitely going to be one of my questions, because I
yeah,
mean, in that book we see Despera, and
yes,
she hails
that's
from the DC comics, where
yes,
that's
where
that's Dora, Shira. So
we would have
I was
we would have
curious.
definitely, as far as I know, the workaround ish probably would have been through something like Despera,
Okay.
to just get to that, because for whatever reason, I guess because of when the toys were made, like Hordak and the Horde were technically He-Man
Yeah.
associated first before they became like the big threat over in the She-Ra line.
Right.
So that's kind of why we would have gotten to play with some of that, and then the DC comic stuff with Despera would have been the basis for using some version of that in ours. So um, and then, however Evelyn does or doesn't fit into that, and if that's true or not, but it would make the bats make a whole lot of sense. So
Well, and
um,
it's a good hook to end the show on. I
yes,
mean, that's
unfortunately, to end the show, as far as we know, but it takes
right.
so long to make it too. Like even if today, what is this, a Sunday? So not today, tomorrow on a Monday, Netflix called and was like, yeah, we're going to do it. From the time we even have a finished script to when the episode is locked and done, it's 18 months.
Yeah.
Like, it's so even if we did, the trick then at that point is the longer in time we get from the end of season 3, the kids who were the audience for that are going to be getting older and older and older and older, and are not going to necessarily, it's like the little hiker on The Price is Right who yodels when he's going up the hill. Like, you got that window that's just right. But then once you yo past that window, and so I don't know where we are in that window, but I feel like we're getting towards the back of that window. But yeah, it's 18 months, man. And we came in, I mean, we were it was a hard 18 months for us for each episode. And again, they do bits and pieces all over the place, so it's not like they're just there for 18 months with one script. It's because they have so many
Right.
different teams, and animatics teams and effects teams and background painting teams that would go in and put in bits and pieces of stuff. But we were pretty hand to mouth, I want to say, speed wise at the beginning, because we had, which was fantastic, we had our full cast, like a radio play, always together. So we had, specifically before the pandemic, and we all Zoomed whenever possible at the same time once the pandemic started, and I got to see everyone's closets. That's where they all recorded at first. And then you could tell who was getting more work than everyone else, because suddenly their closet was slowly turning into a sound booth, and others were just like closets. Um, but um, but it was like a radio play. So we would have 9 people, like, just behind the glass. I want to say we were all there together for the first 9 episodes, maybe. I think episode 10 was probably the first one that we did in Zoom bits and pieces. But I want to say for those first 9, we were all together at the soundstage. I mean, at the sound booth in Burbank, recording those, and so the cast all got to know each other. Like, so it was just nice because it helped with rapport between the characters,
Yeah. Yeah.
and having everybody there at the same time too, which I know not a lot of animated shows get to have. Like, we got to really, if something wasn't working, then you didn't have to wait. Like, if there's an exchange or something that's not landing, you're like, you know what? Let's just cut that entirely, or let's just add a new thing here, or let's have it say this,
Yeah.
instead of waiting 6 months for everything to get edited together, and then you start to see it, and you're like, oh, we have to go back and re-record blank and blank. So it was great, and they were a really great bunch. I do miss them on our Tuesdays, on our Mo Tuesdays. as Fred Tatasciore would always, it's Mo Tuesday, everybody, and he brought in a big soundboard, and he would do like morning zoo noises, and it was a good time. It was a good time.
That's fun. Awesome. I mean, the voice cast was fantastic. I was very excited. I didn't know who the voices were going in, but as soon as Adam started talking, I recognized Spider-Man from the Spider-Man games.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that was really cool. I think this show has my favorite Skeletor. This Skeletor is a lot of fun.
I love Ben so much. I love Ben so much. Ben Skeletor. Like we had some worry at first because especially because Mark Hamill was over on the other show
Yeah,
that we had a lot of reads coming in um, that were Joker that were coming in specifically as just Joker and variations thereof.
sure.
And we went back into like the casting sides and we're like, what are we doing wrong? Like what? And so we looked at like the descriptions for Skeletor. And so that's when we kind of also started casting for Keldor too.
Mm,
And so we were like, well, who's going to be the right Keldor? And then can they affect their voice
yeah,
to then have the same mannerisms? Because we were going to have Keldor for like three, almost four full episodes before we got rid of him, and we were going to come back to him every now and then. But we wanted a really good Keldor. We wanted to be the same actor, so we got Ben, and Ben crushed it. And I mean, like the first time he did the Skeletor speech, that's in the Age of Skeletor speech at the end of episode 4, Colette Sunderman, our voice director, was just like, he finished it and he like starts screaming, and she's like, I feel bad asking you to do that again, but can you do that again? Like, or did you hurt yourself? He's like, no, man, I'm fine. Okay. But he was great. He's such a treat.
yeah,
They all were, but also like from a writing standpoint, I didn't realize, and I feel silly admitting it, but like until I was like in the middle of season 2 with the writing, where I'm like, am I just writing him as Monarch from Venture Brothers? And I was like, oh, I think I am just writing him as Monarch from Venture, but like it's not exactly the same. But like I realized like the voice in my head, like before I started hearing Ben's voice, like
yeah,
when we
yeah,
were
yeah.
writing it, and it's just like with the grandiosity, and then every now and then like the joke's not working, and giving him like the dad jokes and stuff. I was like, maybe it is but I do love the Monarch. So and then there's more legitimate menace, I think, that we did with our Skeletor than happens with the Monarch, because you never quite take the Monarch seriously.
Right, right.
And Skeletor does try to drown the children.
Yeah,
He buries
yeah,
them alive and tries to drown them. So we're like, no, he's legit. He's a bad guy. He's a legit bad guy. It's okay. But yeah, Ben was fantastic. I miss all of those guys, but and weirdly Ben was and he's so not, which I mean it's an actor, right? But he's so not
sure.
Skeletor. Like he's just he's this real nice, like easygoing guy, and then like you'd go to Skeletor and he would just like do it. So it was really cool to see. But he was a treat. I loved him.
That's awesome. Uh, there's a lot of fun moments in this show too, like little fun moments. I think I can't remember what season it is, but when they first go to confront Skeletor at Snake Mountain and he's talking through the microphone and
The
there's the
microphone.
bad feedback. I mean, I was
Yeah, yeah,
laughing so hard, and then I was trying to explain it to my kids why I was laughing, and I was like, well, the old toy had
yeah,
a microphone, but it didn't work very well, and so it was always squeaking and it had this bad feedback, and they just looked at me with blank stares, like, what are you talking about?
yeah. No,
Like they didn't have Bluetooth.
that Christmas, my wife had gotten me, and it's still in the box because I'm afraid that if I open it, it will turn to just like Indiana Jones dust in my hands. But
Hmm.
an original Snake Mountain. And so, Pete and I were working on the script for that one. And so I was just trying to spice it up a little bit. And I was going through Cringer's like speech that he was well read on Snake Mountain as they're walking inside of Snake Mountain. I'm like, he's got to talk about Snake Mountain. And over there on the shelf is the box, and it's got all of the toy features. And so I was like, can we get away with that? Let's try. And so then it evolved from there. But being a love letter too, because you're absolutely right. Like that should have been the coolest toy in the world,
Yeah,
and it wanted to be the coolest toy in the world,
sure.
and it was not the coolest toy in the world. It really wasn't. But it had the blinking lights in the eyes, and it had the microphone. So that's kind of where that came from.
That was fun. And then you had in the with the what are they called? The little creatures, the Nevets,
The Navits, yeah.
Navits, yeah. and you've got Orko doing his, bumbling his spells, and then we get to see the revelation
Mm-hmm.
animation come in for a little bit, and the music kicks in from Bear McCreary.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
just little moments like that. Like I found myself just smiling, with pure glee throughout this series, and it was just a
Thank
lot of
you.
fun. You've
I'm
got,
glad that we could give you that.
yeah, I mean, I was I was laughing pretty good when Stratos gets to do his homemade intro sequence that he does with his with his companions. I mean, even down to the cardboard sign that he had hung up, and like it was,
Yeah.
yeah, like it was just so good, so fun. You've got Skeletor, who becomes a part of Castle Grayskull when he becomes Cosmic,
Mm-hmm.
Skeletor, and I mean that was just metal as could be. That was just
Well, and I think we get that toy soon. I think the Cosmic Terror
I've seen
Dragon
it. Yeah,
Skin.
I've seen him in on Instagram and Twitter and
Yeah,
stuff.
it
I've seen
was a
pictures of him,
pre-order like from Walmart Con or something
something like that. Yeah.
last year, and it was delayed. I know it was supposed to be in time for Christmas, and then I got an email or something that said like a 3/31 ship date now. So,
Okay.
but what's cool is at one point I did get to go hang out. They were very kind at Mattel. My kid was doing a report for school about just like toys and recycling and just
Yeah.
sustainability materials, and so we took a tour of like the R&D at Mattel. And so they have like their workshop area where they have like unfinished things or half finished things or 3D printed things where they're testing out the joints and all that stuff. And there were a couple of one of them being that Cosmic Terror Skeletor, like unpainted, was just like on somebody's desk sideways like that. I'm like, well, their toy's right there. It's not. Well, I guess that's why it's delayed because it's sitting on that person's desk right there. But it's really cool. It's really cool to see specifically like those designs from the show, those assets from the show. It's of course to size. They can't. There's
Sure,
never going to
sure.
be a Wind Raider for it because our Wind Raider was a freaking school bus. So like, there's never
Right.
unless it's a Super 7 Thundercats tank or
There
something
you
that
there you go.
I don't think we would have.
You
Um,
you pay $600 for it. Whew,
that's that's
brutal.
steep. That's steep. The Thundercats tank
Right?
is cool, but that's pretty
Yep.
steep.
Exactly. Exactly.
Especially because it's not playable. It's just a
It's just
coffee
there.
table that you put your figures into.
Yep. Yep.
No offense to the good folks at Super 7. I think you guys make some really awesome stuff. That's just really it's a big toy.
Yep.
Um, an expensive toy.
I mean,
Uh,
that's the whole reason I passed on the Super 7 Snake Mountain that they did for the classics line. I mean, that thing, it's beautiful, but I have no place to put that thing.
yeah. Well,
You
even
know.
like with this, it's in my younger son's room. And I love it. It's fantastic. The Gray Skull for our show.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The playset, it's real. Like
It's a cool playset.
I wasn't expecting it to actually be like cool. Like,
Yeah.
because I thought like, okay, because in my head I'm like, okay, old when He-Man was popular, right? It's just the little clamshell thing that opens up,
Mm-hmm. It has
and
a trap door.
it has a trapdoor, and it was cool enough. But like this thing's got sounds and shit opens up, and it's got hatches, and it's also its footprint is huge. Like
Yeah.
it's a really big toy.
Yeah.
So that's why it's in their room because I have nowhere to put it in my office.
Yep. Yeah, we
Uh,
got that for my youngest son for Christmas. We got him the
yeah,
Castle Grayskull, and we were putting it together that morning, and I was like, this might be the best Castle Grayskull they've ever made. Like
well, and
this
it's
thing is,
solid. Like it really,
yeah,
as far as like
it's,
the mold and
yep.
stuff,
It
it
doesn't feel like you're gonna
snap
break it.
tight. No,
It
no, no,
it
no.
feels like it can be played with, and that's
Yeah.
what's important. And
There's
man,
an
just
Easter egg in that I want to say, there's, I forget what it is, but there's a thing where if you hold down one of the buttons for a long period of time, then it gives you like a bonus Skeletor noise.
oh, cool.
So go play with it. I forget. I
That's what
think it's
I'm.
one of
Yeah.
the ones. I think it's one of the ones on the top.
Okay.
Look up on the forehead. I think
Yeah.
it's one
Yeah.
of those that if you hold it down, it stays quiet for a little while, and then it gives you like a Skeletor pain scream or like there's something that comes out that isn't in like the regular cycle of rotating
Okay.
the stuff. Yeah,
Well, I know what I'm doing today. I'm gonna go play with Castle Grayskull.
it's your whole day. It's your whole day.
That's my day.
Leave me
That's
alone.
my day.
Leave me alone.
Well,
I'm looking for the Easter egg.
um, yeah, and then you've got that really cool moment where we get to see King Grayskull, and you get to see him, break bad, which
Yes.
was
Well, and Alan
Alan
Oppenheimer
Oppenheimer.
coming
Yeah,
in.
which was fantastic.
Which was, and that was one of Rob's strokes of genius on that too. He was like, "What if I told you that we got Alan Oppenheimer to be King Grayskull?" I was like, "Can he do the Skeletor laugh when he changes?" And he was like, "Yes, he can do that." I'm like, "Okay, well, we're good, we're good." He was really awesome too. Like as far as like the guest cast go, like getting those people in, like he was great. He just came in and he had like anecdotes about the old show because he did double duty because he was man at
Yeah.
arms too, and it
Hmm.
was just it was a treat. And he very much approved of, and we made sure to tell Ben he approved of Ben's Skeletor. And so Ben was like, "Oh my god, that means so much."
That's
But
awesome.
it was nice. It was really nice. It was really nice.
Very cool. Uh, I think I've asked all the questions that I wanted to ask about the show specifically. Before I let you go, I guess why do you think that Masters of the Universe has such a lasting appeal?
I mean, it's cool as shit. I mean, that's
Yeah.
I think a big part of it. Like, from I mean, even from like I think about this with the toys back here behind me. Like, even if you're a kid who doesn't know anything about it, like me, when I got the Merman and the Beastmaster figures when I was little, and I got those first and didn't have any context, I was just like, this is like a cool Universal monster-ish kind of thing. It's like
Yeah.
it's just a
Yeah.
cool. He's got a weird corn cob sword, but it's you don't have to know anything about it to like know that it's cool and it's brightly colored. And like part of me is like, we should have given the heroes more interesting colors, because I look over here and I'm like, oh wow, we got bright orange and bright green. And over here I'm like, all right, well, there's some blues and some navies. um but it I think the diversity of the line, and like the number of characters there are, and the number in a way like Pokemon,
Yeah.
that there were so many different kinds of things you can play with, and they all kind of have their own interesting little stories attached to them, which is why when they had the comics that came with the figures, it's fantastic,
Hmm.
because then you're like, oh, that's this guy's story. This is okay. This is Fisto's story. Um, or who was Fisto's counterpart with the gold
The
hand?
Jitsu.
Jitsu's. This is Jitsu's story. Um, where you get to Roboto and you're like, oh, that's cool. Roboto's got clear parts and you can see the inside. Um, but I think a lot of it just has to do with there's lots of ways in. There's lots of stuff to grab onto. Specifically if you're a kid or you're a young audience person. I think if you're a little bit older, there's that cool, whether it's the old stuff with the sword and sandally kind of Conan the Barbarian ish stuff, or kind of the magical science Thor Asgardian stuff that we kind of
Yeah.
with a heavy dose of Kirby, which is super on purpose. In ours, I think it's a sci-fi adventure magical hero show. Like, I mean, it's the same kind of appeal, I would say, that a lot of certain corners of the Marvel universe have. And I just kind of I wish there were. It's a shame that of all the things for He-Man to be named, he's named He-Man, because I feel like if there had been any kind of like, and it's the name, so I'm not knocking the whatever, but I feel like he gets there's a ding against the whole franchise from the get-go if you're someone who's not familiar with it, that it's
Right.
like, and he's called He-Man, and like he's just like, oh, okay, so like I'm not going to take that seriously because he's roided out and jacked up and he's called He-Man. Like, I get it, but it's so much more than that.
Yeah.
um so yeah, so I wish there was, I know for a while, right, when Warner Brothers was going to do the movie, this is like 20 years ago or something, but like they were just going to call it Grayskull, I think.
Okay.
And then there's like just Masters of the Universe, right, as like as a thing to hang it all on. So yeah, I don't know. I wish it was taken more seriously, but I kind of like that it isn't, because then you can do things like the elephant guy with the
Yeah. Yep.
snout spout, or
Snout spout. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
or
You've
Mechaneck.
got the yeah,
Um,
you've got a cybernetic cowboy with guns that come out of his body.
goes,
I mean,
yeah,
yeah.
blast star,
Yeah.
um, or dragstore. But that's also really cool. I don't know. Like, there's something really cool about
I
all of that
think,
too.
and so I've got some friends, and none of them grew up on He-Man like I did, and so they're all Marvel guys or DC guys
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
or all kinds of stuff. But we talk about these things, and one of my favorite games to play is I'll show them a picture of a character. I was like, okay, what's his name? And then they try to
Ooh,
guess.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I mean, it's fun because they're very basic names. You've got a skeleton that glows, so of course his name is Scareglow.
Mhm.
But it's cheesy, it's silly, but it's also endearing and it's charming, to
Well,
those of us
yeah.
who grew up with it,
Well,
and
that's
yeah,
like whether or not anything happens with it. Like, I think that was like to the naming of it, like the fun of it. I think my favorite thing, like getting to do on the whole show, was when we turned Ram Mam. We were like, well, what do we call her? And so, like, Rob and I were bouncing names back and forth. I was like, can we just call her Rampage? Like, because she's angry and it's still got the Ram in it. He was like, oh, yeah. But like, it totally made sense.
mhm,
But it was like, it's like, when you get like getting to name a GI Joe or something where you're like, oh yes, and
yeah,
when she's a villain now she has Rampage instead of
yeah,
Ram
yeah,
Bam. So that's but yeah, no, but that's the fun of it too. Is just that like some of the names are cheesy, and that's
yeah,
what else are you gonna call a dude who's got like a robot elephant snout? Like snout spout. Like I don't know what else you would call him.
right,
Um, but it's crazy. Like I love that. And like, there's a little bit of that, like in Quantum Mania, like with the broccoli head guy and stuff, like in that
sure,
old Kirby cosmically anything is possible way. That I think it totally tracks that you can have talking tigers here because they just learned how to talk. And that's it.
hmm,
Yeah.
yeah, fantastic. I don't think I have any other questions for you today. I'll let you get
Okay.
on with your day, but I mean, this has been fantastic. I've really enjoyed chatting with you. Thanks for
No, me
joining
too.
me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And who's I gotta ask, who's the big,
Okay,
is that Moss Man? Who is that behind you to the right, on your right?
right here.
Yeah, that big swamp looking guy.
That is Cthulhu.
That's a Cthulhu. Okay.
That's a Cthulhu statue, and he's massive. Let me bring him up here for you.
That's huge, man. Good grief.
So he is a big boy.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Is that a Mondo or where's that?
No, what this is from a game called Death May Die.
Okay.
It's a board game, a tabletop game, and this is one of the game pieces for the
That's
game. So
awesome.
you play as different characters who are trying to take down different agents of the cosmos and Cthulhu type monsters.
Yeah.
This is one of the campaigns where your characters actually have to like he's the
That's
game board and
awesome.
like they
That's
have to
really
like
cool.
climb up Cthulhu and stuff to
That's
battle him.
cool. That's
So
cool.
yeah, really cool. It comes as just that standard, as miniatures do. Well, it's not miniature, but it comes, with that just that standard gray plastic. And then my brother, who is an artist, he painted it for me,
That's awesome.
and it's really cool.
Well, because
Yeah,
that's all, man. I'm looking at it like height wise. That's like the same size as Castle Grayskull.
yeah, yep.
Yeah,
He could take
that's
on
dope.
he could take on Grayskull pretty easily. It's really
That's
fun
dope.
because I've taken pictures where I took the little Mega Blocks He
Yeah,
Man,
yeah.
and placed him, just there where he can fight.
Yep.
And I mean, he disappears. The thing's so big, but it makes for
One
some
of
really cool photos.
one of my favorite little bootleg things that a friend of mine sent me, or I say bootleg, custom, is it's a 2-pack of it's Lego figures, but they're painted or stickered or whatever, and it's a He-Man and a Superman,
Oh,
and
cool.
with the mini comic
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So that's yes. So I
That's awesome.
totally appreciate having, yeah. There's a whole, I got Roboto, I got Faker over there. What Faker's the one I was sad we couldn't do Faker on the show. I
Oh,
wanted
that
to do
would have been
Faker.
cool.
It was almost episode, the first one after they got their powers. It was almost 5. Was almost all of them were going to be Fakered.
Oh, cool.
Um, and rightly so. Netflix was like, we don't really know them yet, so we probably shouldn't do that part yet. I'm like, okay. I was like, fine. But yeah, I had a Faker story for all of them.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I got and we had drive-through toys. We had Sonic had some drive-through
Yeah,
toys.
yeah. I got a couple
Um,
of those. I didn't get the spoons, the Power Sword spoon and the staff spoon.
I
I didn't
have
get
those. I
those,
have those spoons. I
but
have
I
those
got I
spoons.
got the little figures that they had. Those were fun.
So yeah, so I don't see all of my figures often, but I had to collect them from my child's floor. But they're back here on the shelf, just just for you guys at
Oh,
home.
perfect,
Yeah.
perfect. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. Uh, and thank you everybody out there for watching. Before I let you go, where can people find you on your
Just at
socials?
it's real easy. It's just at Bryan Q Miller at Twitter
Okay.
for the time being until Twitter is taken away or
Yep.
implodes or
Whatever happens with that.
whatever happens with that. None of the alternatives have worked out so far,
Right.
but that's for now at least. That's where I am.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. It was wonderful
Thank you.
having you.
Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
and thanks for watching this episode. You can find me as always here on YouTube at Dad at Arms. I'm also on Instagram and Twitter at Red Pyramid 9 or just Dad at Arms. And mostly what I do there is just photos of my toys and then talk about master stuff when I want to. So
Right
thanks for
on.
watching.